You think your badge makes you untouchable? Step back, or I'll have you removed. Now.
Gate B7, evening rush. A black CEO in a coral dress is tapped by security. Step aside. Camera pans to the first-class priority boarding sign. Her boarding pass scans green still. They turn her away. Phones rise. The PA chimes. She doesn't argue. One breath, one call. Ops, I need a live policy ID. Log everything. A timer flashes 2. On-screen text, security booted her. What happened 2 minutes later? Froze $5B. Wano. Beat. The supervisor speaks into the radio bear. She lifts her phone to the speaker. Would you like proof on system now? Gate B7 is running hot with the evening rush. The board flips from on time to final call in quick blinks. First-class priority boarding glows above the lane. A black CEO in a coral dress rolls a carry-on to the scanner. Chin steady, phone in her palm. The scanner chirps green. The agent's smile hardens. I need a quick verification. Step aside for a moment. She pauses. Which policy number? The agent glances at a supervisor in a navy suit who has been watching from the rope line. Security is waved over. The officer on the left nods to the other and plants himself at her shoulder. Passengers feel the shift before they understand it. A hush moves down the queue. Someone pockets a passport and lifts a phone. The supervisor speaks low into the radio. Remove from the cabin. The label reads non-compliant. The phrase hangs there like it belongs on a checklist. The CEO does not talk about it. She looks at the sign above the lane. First class, priority boarding. She looks back to the agent. Which policy number? Show me the clause on the system. There is no clause produced. The agent repeats the phrase policy and asks for a secondary check away from the crowd. The officer reaches toward her elbow to guide her aside. She is already making one call. The phone is on speaker at her chest. You are on with operations and legal. Save this recording. I need a live policy ID. Log everything. Her voice is calm, like she is confirming a gate change. The officer pauses at the word legal. The PA chime breaks in. The announcement says there is a disruptive passenger near B7, that passengers may resume boarding once security resolves the matter. The crowd reacts with a collective inhale. The CEO does not flinch. She lifts her boarding pass again. The scanner chirps green again. The light does not lie. A ramp agent in a high-vis vest drifts closer and squints at the podium screen. He frowns. That seat is coded. First, I can see the board member flag on the CRM. He whispers, but the mic on the intercom catches half of it and the half echoes. Operations answers, we are on. What is happening at B7? She replies without raising her volume. I am being removed from first class after a valid scan. They are citing a policy with no number. The supervisor steps in front of her to block the lane and speaks to the phone as if scolding it. Security decision stands. The officer nods again like he is confirming a routine. The crowd aims their cameras now, not just phones. The red record icon is a field of small dots. 2 minutes appear on a timer in the corner of the screen. The CEO glances to it like a pilot checking altitude. She states the items for the record: boarding pass, scan history, gate camera coverage, intercom log, weight and balance sheet not impacted by my seat. Copy that says, operations, provide proof of the system. The supervisor shakes her head. This is not the forum. The CEO says a single line that lands harder than any argument. Would you like the proof on the system now? The ramp agent clears his throat. I can mirror the manifest to the gate display if authorized. He is the first voice in the scene that sounds like help instead of heat. The supervisor hesitates. The officer looks to her for direction. Passengers whisper. Some form a human buffer without planning it, leaving the CEO a small circle of space. The agent at the podium taps a key and loses color. The screen shows the seat, the name, the status. The camera above the lane winks its red tally light. The CEO keeps the phone up. Her free hand does not shake. Operations asks for the supervisor's name and badge. The supervisor's radio crackles and dies to a whisper. The CEO closes the loop in one sentence. I am here for standards. Log everything. The hook tightens not with volume, but with receipts. And the next beat is already lining up. The airport looks ordinary, but the stakes around this gate are anything but. The woman in the coral dress isn't here on a junket or a status flex. She represents a funding consortium that keeps this airline's cash oxygen flowing. The number is simple and heavy. $5 billion in revolving credit and capital commitments. That money lets the airline buy fuel without prepaying, rotate aircraft through heavy maintenance, lease new narrow bodies without choking the balance sheet, and ride out ugly weather weekends when crews time out and flight cancellations pile up. Most passengers don't think about liquidity until a carrier runs out of it. She thinks about it for a living. Her title is brutal in its clarity: ethics auditor and board representative. She is not internal PR. She does not spin. She checks whether words on policy pages match behavior at the gate, on the ramp, in the cabin. The paperwork that gave this airline cheap money included a clause that sounds soft until it snaps. Continued access requires compliance certification, bias testing, and documented remediation when employees misuse process to humiliate or exclude. A violation doesn't instantly cut funding, but it can freeze disbursements while an audit runs. Freeze is the word everyone dreads. Vendors still want payment. Employees still want payroll. Planes still want fuel. That's why her presence at B7 is quiet and loaded at the same time. She booked the ticket herself through a standard channel with no special handling because clean tests happen under normal light. She travels light, carries her own bag, and uses her full legal name on the manifest. The system flagged her as first class and board member rep because it must, not to glamorize, but to ensure duty of care. The agent, the supervisor, and security either missed that or chose to press through it. The airline's internal systems are not mysterious. The CRM at the podium shows seat maps, ticket class, and status flags. The scanner logs every beep with timestamps and agent IDs. Cameras cover the boarding lanes because crowd control requires accountability. The intercom records every announcement to a local server for 72 hours before offloading to archive. Even the aircraft's weight and balance sheet acknowledges who sits where because distribution matters. Inside that web of systems, truth is normally boring. Tonight, truth is about to be loud. She is not new to this. A year ago, she audited a boutique hotel chain after a staffer pulled a guest's badge at a gala to double-check identity only when certain guests walked in. Before that, she reviewed a private banking floor where a greeter steered specific clients toward the wrong line. In both cases, the fix wasn't a press release. It was training, recertification, and a pause in funding until leadership swallowed the medicine. Those cases moved millions. An airline moves billions. The difference is scale, not principle. At this gate, a handful of words policy, random, non-compliant carry, financial torque. If the team here can't produce a policy ID or show why the scan that turned green should be treated as red, then the discrepancy becomes more than a rough customer service moment. It becomes a compliance event with a paper trail. When that trail touches the clause in the funding agreement, Treasury notices, the CFO notices, the board notices. That's why operations stayed on her call. That's why the supervisor's radio suddenly feels heavier than it did 5 minutes ago. The crowd around B7 doesn't know any of this. They see a traveler told to step aside and 2 officers making space with their shoulders. They hear the PA tone and the phrase disruptive passenger. But the phone on speaker tells a different story to the people who can read the logs. The airline is about to learn the difference between a script and a system. And the system, line by line, will decide who actually controls who boards this flight and whether $5 billion stays in motion or goes on ice. The trigger is small enough to miss if you blink. The agent tilts the boarding pass as if a new angle might change the barcode. The scanner light stays green. The supervisor leans in, asks for a secondary verification off to the side, and slips in a phrase that sounds procedural but lands personal. Random screening. The black CEO keeps her voice level. Which policy authorizes secondary after a valid green scan? I need the policy ID. The supervisor does not answer the question. She gestures. Security, please assist. 2 officers step in, professional and quiet, but their presence rewrites the scene. One plants a shoulder near the rope line, the other positions a half step behind the CEO like an usher directing a detour. The supervisor squeezes the radio trigger. Remove from the cabin. Code as non-compliant pending verification. The words are neat, practiced, and wrong. The CEO looks at the scanner, then the display on the podium. She repeats the only line that matters. Policy ID on system, please. The agent does not pull up a manual. He pivots to tone. Ma'am, I just need you to step aside. She does not step anywhere. She raises her phone to the speaker. Ops and legal, you are alive. Save the call recording. I am requesting the active policy code for secondary after green. Log everything. The word everything is not a threat, it is a boundary. The officer behind her exhales and relaxes his hand. The supervisor keeps the radio up. Gate B7 has an uncooperative passenger. The PA chime follows. Boarding will pause until security resolves the situation. The crowd hears that and reads a script they have heard before. The camera phones shift from idle to record. A child asks a parent what non-compliant means. A man in row 3 of the queue mutters that he saw the pass scan green. What he saw now matters. The ramp agent in a high visibility vest edges closer to the podium as if looking for a printer jam. He glances at the CRM. First class shows in blue. A small flag in the corner reads, Board Member Rep. He whispers to the agent, that is a first-class authorization. The agent answers without looking up. We are doing a secondary. Ops comes in clean over the phone. State the policy number authorizing secondary after a successful boarding scan. The supervisor answers the phone as if it were a person. Security discretion. Ops does not move. Security discretion is not a policy. Provide the document ID. The CEO does not pivot to anger. She pivots to inventory. For the record, my boarding scan history shows one successful scan at 184217. Intercom log has a disruptive passenger tag at 184302. Cameras cover the lane and podium. Weight and balance unaffected by C2A per standard. Copy, says Ops. Submit proof on system. The ramp agent clears his throat again and offers the path. I can mirror the manifest and scan log to the gate display if authorized. The supervisor dodges the mirror by moving the problem off stage. Take her to the side for secondary. The officer gestures toward a blank patch of wall beside the jetway door. The CEO does not resist and does not comply with a void. Which system will run the secondary? What inputs? Who certifies the outcome? The officer flicks his eyes at the supervisor. The questions are not rhetorical. They are keys in a lock. Without answers, the door stays shut. A woman in line mutters that she is filming for her own protection. A man asks the supervisor if this is a random check run on anyone else in first. The supervisor ignores them both and goes back to the radio. Ops is still on the phone. Heavy silence filling the gaps between words. The CEO ends the exchange with a soft call sign. I am here for standards. Log everything. The phrase lands and stays. It tells the room that the event is now bigger than a gate spat, that a system will be asked to explain itself, and that a paper trail already exists, whether anyone likes it or not. Operations does not raise its voice. It enters the room like a light switching on. Gate B7, identify yourself, comes through the speaker with a clipped cadence that belongs to checklists and incident forms. The supervisor answers with her title and first name only. Ops asks for last name, employee ID, station code, and the badge number of the security officers present. The radio on her shoulder suddenly sounds less like authority and more like a microphone placed under a bright lamp. She gives the numbers. The crowd cannot hear the specifics, but they hear the change in tone. Legal joins the call without fanfare. This is counsel. Confirm the policy document authorizing a secondary after a valid green scan. We need the document ID, revision date, and the exception clause, if any. Silence can be a shape. It takes over the space between the supervisor's inhale and her answer. Security discretion, she repeats. Legal does not blink. Discretion is not a policy. Provide the document. If you cannot, state that for the record. The word record makes 3 people in line lower their phones and then raise them higher. The ramp agent finally gets permission to mirror the screen. He taps a sequence-only ramp and gate staff know by muscle memory. The gate monitor flips from weather radar to a clean grid. Flight number, manifest rows, seat assignments, loyalty tiers, and a column of green ticks that show boarding events. Seat 2 highlights in blue. The name matches the passport. The status flag reads Board Member Rep. The agent's cursor hovers over the scan log. A side panel opens with timestamps and agent initials. 2 clean reads, seconds apart, both success. The agent speaks low without looking at the supervisor. This is on system. Ops asks the CEO to confirm presence and role for the record. She does, simply, ethics auditor and board representative for the funding consortium. She adds that the call is being saved, the gate cameras are live, and the PA announcement labeling her disruptive began after the first successful scan. Legal replies with a line that sounds like a door closing. Understood. We are in an incident posture. The supervisor tries to retake the frame by moving the person rather than the facts. Secondary screening area is around the corner, she says, gesturing past the jetway door. Legal declines from 1,000 miles away. Do not relocate while the root cause is under determination. This is a process validation, not a safety event. The security officer nearest the ropes stiffens at that and stops motioning with his hand. The other officer adjusts his stance to neutral. Authority is now on the phone, not at the rope. Ops directs the gate to pull up the policy index. The agent opens a library that looks innocent until you read it line by line. Boarding standards, bias prevention, verification procedures, exception flows, revision notes. The search bar returns a list for secondary screening. Every entry pairs a code with conditions. None authorized secondary after a green scan, absent a flag mismatch or security trigger. The agent's face gives that away before his words do. He reads the top line anyway, because reading is what cleans the moment. Secondary is only for inactive, unreadable, flagged IDs, or seat misalignments. That is the text. Legal asks for confirmation that the passenger in 2A has an active first-class entitlement, no security flag, and 2 consecutive successful board scans. Ops confirms all 3. The supervisor starts to say something about tone and cooperation. Counsel cuts in without cutting her down. We are not in a tone review. We are in a policy review. If policy is absent, the event becomes a misuse of process. Misuse of process triggers clause review under the funding agreement. That phrase moves weight. You can see it in how the supervisor's shoulders lower half an inch, in how the bystanders stop whispering and simply listen, in how the officer behind the CEO takes a half step back to stop looming in anyone's peripheral vision. The ramp agent, who is becoming the truth keeper by default, looks to the CEO for a beat and then to the monitor, waiting for direction. She gives only what is necessary. Show the intercom log for the last 5 minutes. He pulls it up. The words on the display do not favor storytelling. They are time, device ID, message string. Disruptive passenger near B7 appears after the scan success. It is right there in numbers. Ops requests the supervisor read the policy ID she believes she was enforcing. She cannot. Legal asks for an acknowledgement of that on the record. She finally says she cannot produce it. The room does not cheer. It exhales. The CEO keeps the phone at chest level. Would you like the proof on the system now? It is not a dare. It is an offer to finish the work. Ops answers with one word that changes the cadence of the next hour. Yes. The monitor at B7 becomes a classroom. The ramp agent brings up the CCTV feed from the fixed lens over the boarding lane. The picture is grainy but clean enough to settle arguments. Timecode stamps tick along the bottom, synced to the gate computer. It shows the agent taking the boarding pass, the green light, the pivot to the supervisor, and the hand motion that summons security. No raised voice, no refusal. Just a sequence that looks routine until it isn't. Ops asks for a still frame at the moment of the first green scan. The agent freezes it. Legal notes the time allowed for the record and asks the supervisor to acknowledge what the image shows. She nods once. Next, the agent splits the screen. The left pane remains CCTV. The right pane shifts to the scan log with 2 clean entries under the same name and seat. He drags the intercom transcript into a small window at the bottom. Its text is the opposite of dramatic. Device ID, event, message. Disruptive passenger flag posts 25 seconds after the first green. Ops lets that sit. Counsel asks a simple question. Who authored the PA message? The agent highlights the badge ID tied to the announcement. The supervisor's initials glow on the screen. She inhales and steadies her jaw. Ops asks her to read the policy she believed applied when she keyed the mic. She cannot. Counsel records the admission. The security officer nearest the rope shifts from a stance of management to one of witnesses. He states for the call that he did not observe refusal to comply, only a boarding pause initiated by the gate. The other officer confirms he was asked to maintain space, not respond to a safety trigger. Those two sentences pull the heat out of the word disruptive. The crowd falls into a hush that feels respectful rather than charged. Phones keep recording, but the posture in the line has changed. People are watching a process, not a spectacle. The CEO does not narrate her own vindication. She treats the room like a conference call. For the record, she says, "The weight and balance for this flight will not shift if seat 2A is occupied as ticketed." Ops has already pulled the preliminary sheet. They confirm distribution is normal and within limits. Counsel asks the agent to document that no operational need justified removal. He types, "Slow and careful." The keystrokes sound loud in the gate's tiled air. Ops requests the crew manifest for cross-check and has the agent tap a secured tab. The system prompts for a second login. The agent glances to the supervisor. She gives it because refusing would now be louder than permitting. The crew tab appears. Nothing there touches passenger eligibility. Counsel says as much and closes that loop. Then they pivot to the clause that matters. The funding agreement requires that when process is used in a way that appears inconsistent with policy, an audit runs and disbursements may pause until remediation is certified. Counsel reads that sentence verbatim. The words are not theater, they are a lever. The supervisor tries to frame intent. She says she was protecting order at the gate. Ops acknowledges the duty and clarifies the sequence. Order is protected by following policy, not inventing it. The line lands without sting, it simply lands. The ramp agent keeps the mirror up, pointer circling the green ticks like a teacher, guiding eyes to the answer key. The truth keeper emerges without title or rank, only accuracy. He asks if Ops wants the screen recorded. They do. He starts the capture that will live in the incident file. The CEO's phone is still on speaker chest level. Her tone has not moved an inch since the first ask. "Would you like the complete packet compiled now?" Ops answers yes. She forwards a pre-built checklist that feels like muscle memory. Boarding pass images, scan log export, CCTV clip, PA transcript, policy index query results, weight and balance excerpt. She adds one line to bind them. This packet is being shared with your compliance, treasury, and the consortium's oversight portal. Ops says received. Legal says proceed. A man in line quietly says he appreciates seeing how it actually works. A woman farther back nods to the officer for giving a clear statement. The supervisor hears none of that. She is looking at the words on the gate screen that will become her night and her next month. The atmosphere is not cruel, it is procedural. That is the difference between punishment and consequence. The timer in the corner of the monitor ticks past the 2-minute mark. The drama has drained, replaced by record keeping. The CEO closes her update to Ops with a line that serves as both status and promise. "I am here for standards, log everything." Ops replies that the record is active. Counsel says the preliminary finding is misuse of process. The next step is formal. The word that follows is the one the airline dreads and the one the audience came to hear. Ops does not dramatize the finding, it timestamps it. Preliminary determination, misuse of process at gate B7. Counsel asks the supervisor to surrender the podium, log into the ramp agent for the remainder of boarding. Her mouth forms a no that never makes sound. She keys out and steps aside. The agent takes the chair, posture squared to the screen, like a person who has decided to be exact rather than brave. Ops instructs security to remain not as enforcers, but as witnesses to a handover. The officer nods and moves a half step so the aisle clears for actual passengers. The CEO does not ask for an apology. She asks for integrity in sequence. First, terminate the behavior. Ops issues the clean directive. The supervisor is relieved of duty for the shift pending investigation. A station manager is paged. The agent at the podium will complete this flight. Security confirms the removal is non-punitive on their side and notes no safety trigger exists. The tone in the area lowers a degree. People breathe easier when the person giving bad orders stops giving orders. Second, freeze exposure until standards are verified. Counsel reads the clause from the funding agreement with the cadence of a checklist. Upon confirmation that process was used inconsistently with policy, disbursement under the facility may be paused pending corrective action and recertification. The Treasury joins the call. The voice is level, Midwest, flat. We are initiating a temporary freeze on the next tranche while compliance completes an audit. Ops acknowledges. The words do not slam, they settle. The airline can run the evening, but tomorrow's money just went on ice. Third, log everything. Ops opens an incident shell and hands the case number out loud. The ramp agent reads it back. He uploads the mirrored screen capture, the scan log, and the intercom transcript. He tags the file with device IDs and his own initials. The officer provides a brief note stating what he did and did not observe. The CEO forwards her call recording and the CCTV clip. Counsel confirms receipt on each item and stamps the packet as shared with compliance and the consortium portal. The case already reads like a textbook. Claim, evidence, decision, action. A murmur rolls through the queue that feels more like a civics lesson than a crowd scene. You can hear people quietly rethinking what a boarding lane actually is. Someone in line says that the green light meant something after all. The agent finishes the upload and looks to the CEO. His voice is soft, like someone asking a teacher if they did the math right. Anything else you want in the file? She gives him a small answer that carries weight. Your name. Your note that you followed the system and mirrored on request. He types it. He will not forget what it felt like to be accurate on a night. Accuracy mattered. The station manager arrives at a half jog, hair out of place from crossing the concourse. He scans the monitor, hears the line about the freeze, and adjusts his face to professional neutral. He thanks the CEO for staying on record and thanks Ops for live support. He escorts the supervisor away without ceremony. There is no theater in the walk. It is just a line moving to an office where statements are taken and screensavers cycle. The CEO does one more thing that differentiates consequence from spectacle. She addresses the passengers within earshot in a voice you could use in a boardroom or a classroom. Boarding will resume. Thank you for your patience. If anyone needs documentation to explain the delay to a connection or an employer, the gate can provide a statement. The agent nods and opens a template window he has never used before. Ops clears the flight to board. They ask the CEO if she still intends to travel. She checks the timer in the corner of the screen and answers yes. Seat 2A as ticketed. The agent scans her pass. The green light is the same shade as before, but everyone sees it differently now. She steps through the rope with the practiced ease of someone who has done a hard thing without raising her voice. The officer nearest the lane says, "Ma'am," in a way that means respect and nothing else. Treasury stays on the line long enough to confirm that compliance has the packet and a start time for interviews in the morning. The case note adds 2 more lines. Audit begins at 0900, training review to follow. The last action of the sequence is simple and powerful. The CEO repeats the sentence that has framed the night. I am here for standards. Log everything. Ops replies, record is active. Counsel adds, the freeze is in effect. And the gate, which began the hour as a stage, returns to what it was designed to be, a place where people pass from one side to the other by following a system that finally remembered its job. Boarding resumes like a tide coming back in, slow and orderly. The agent at the podium keeps his eyes on the screen and his hands steady. He calls rows, scans, thanks, repeats. What changes is the way people look at him. They stop treating the podium like a wall and start treating it like a control panel that can help or harm depending on who is touching it. A few passengers nod to the CEO as they pass. Not in celebration, but in recognition that she kept the room from turning into something worse. Ops keeps the line open. Counsel drops to listening mode, taking notes for morning interviews. Treasury signs off. After confirming compliance has the packet and a holding statement template if press calls arrive. No one says the word press out loud at the gate. The lesson tonight is that you fix the system before you fix the story. The station manager stands in the wings and directs traffic without stepping on anyone's role. He assigns a second agent to run connection help for nervous travelers. He sets a quiet perimeter so boarding can flow without heckling or hero speeches. The ramp agent, the one who mirrored the manifest and pulled the logs, becomes the hinge of the scene. He does not take a bow. He keeps working. He marks the incident number on a sticky for his pocket because he knows he will be asked about it tomorrow. Ops asks him to add a brief narrative to the file while it is fresh. He writes what he saw. Scan green. Secondary requested without policy ID. PA message posted after green. Mirror authorized. That economy of words reads like clarity. The CEO hears him reading back the line and tells him to include that Ops requested the mirror. He nods and adds it. Security recalibrates. The officer who first stood behind the CEO now stands off to the side, watching the lane with the posture of someone guarding the process rather than a person. He notes in his report that he did not observe refusal to comply and that he was not responding to a safety trigger. He asks the agent if he needs anything before he clears the perimeter. The agent says he is good. The officer leaves a case number for public records because he knows the line between transparency and privacy is drawn by paperwork, not rumors. Two travelers stop to ask the CEO if they can submit statements. She tells them it is optional and thanks them for caring. The agent prints tiny slips with the incident number and a QR code to the customer relations form. The station manager thanks those who ask without turning the moment into a rally. The point is not to build a crowd. The point is to leave a trail that reads the same tomorrow morning as it does right now. Counsel calls the station manager privately. They outline the next 6 steps in plain language: hold the supervisor off duty pending an interview, secure her login history and radio metadata, flag the intercom device for a quick test in the morning to rule out error, schedule bias and process recertification for the gate team, not as punishment but as a reset, identify a training lead who is not in this incident's chain, prepare a draft remedial action plan that ties to the funding clause with dates and owners. The manager writes each item and repeats them back. He does not argue. He wants his station clean. The agent finishes boarding Group 1 and looks to the CEO. He asks in a whisper if she wants a seat map printed for the flight deck so they know she is on board without confusion. She says no, the manifest is clear, and thanks him for doing the quiet work that kept tonight on the rails. He blushes and goes back to calling Rose. It is not heroic. It is precision under pressure. And that matters more. A few minutes later, the station manager steps to the podium between scans and asks the agent to pause. He reads a short correction over the PA in a neutral tone that does not pour salt on anything. An earlier announcement labeling a passenger disruptive at gate B7 was incorrect. Boarding has continued per policy. Thank you for your patience. The words are plain and the silence after them is clean. People adjust bags and step forward when Group 2 is called. The story deflates without losing its lesson. Ops returns on the speaker to close the loop with the CEO before she walks down the jet bridge. They confirm she has a copy of the incident number and that compliance has her contact for morning interviews. She answers yes to both. Ops thanks her for staying calm and factual. She answers with the same line she uses when she wants everyone to remember what this was about. I am here for standards. Log everything. Then she adds one more sentence to make sure the quiet hero is not overlooked. Please note that the ramp agent mirrored on request and preserved the evidence chain. Ops says noted. When she steps onto the jet bridge, the air shifts cooler and the hush of the cabin takes over. The agent watches her go, then looks down at the monitor and sees the cursor still circling the green ticks from earlier. He clicks the mirror off and the screen returns to weather. He straightens a stack of boarding slips and calls the next group. The gate is a gate again. The lesson, though, is set like concrete. A system that writes itself down is a system that can correct itself. And the people who choose accuracy when it is inconvenient become the ones you trust when it actually counts. The jet bridge hums and then fades as she steps onto the aircraft. The cabin crew reads her face and the posture of the officer who gave a small nod at the door. They greet her by name because the manifest puts it right in front of them. A flight attendant offers to hang her coat. She declines and takes seat 2A, places her phone in airplane mode, and sets its screen down. The first thing she does is nothing dramatic. She breathes. The engine whine outside is a steadying sound, like a metronome snapping the evening back into measure. The lead flight attendant kneels in the aisle just enough to speak quietly. We've been briefed. There was a pause at the gate. Are you comfortable continuing? She answers yes. No special handling. Just service per policy. The attendant nods and stands. A person who has seen storms, but also knows when calm is the right weather to project. A minute later, the captain appears at the curtain, eyes taking in the first row, measuring temperature without adding heat. He introduces himself, thanks her for patience, says the flight will push on time, and that the crew is available if anything else is needed. She thanks him and asks for one thing only. Please make sure the post-flight report notes the gate delay as an operations investigation, not a passenger incident. He says done and means it. People in first settle. A businessman glances over, says he saw the scan and the pause, and hopes she's okay. She says she is. He goes back to a spreadsheet, newly aware of how many rules keep his travel invisible when they're followed. In the second row, a teenager tells a parent that the word policy has weight. The parent smiles like someone hearing a child name Gravity. Before push, her phone vibrates once with the last sliver of cellular signal. Ops has sent the incident number and a brief note of the freeze. She locks the screen and lets the cabin door close. She is not here to stage anything. She is here to test whether a system that talks like a machine can behave like a human when someone asks it to read its own instructions. While the pushback tractor hooks up, the lead flight attendant confers with the captain at the galley. They choose tone for the cabin announcement. No drama, no apology tour, just an accurate line. We experienced a brief boarding delay at the gate while operations confirm procedures. Thank you for your patience. When the announcement plays, the plane exhale is real. People adjust seatbelts and pull out books. The aircraft becomes what it always was intended to be, a room that moves. Taxi takes a long S across the field. Out the window, lights scroll past like a checklist being ticked. She reviews her own next steps on a notepad. Morning interviews, station audit plan, recertification schedule for gate teams at this hub and 2 feeder stations. Training modules emphasizing policy ID usage, intercom authority rules, and log preservation. A short commendation memo template for staff who act as truth keepers. A draft letter to the consortium outlining tonight's freeze as procedural rather than punitive, with clear release conditions tied to actions, not adjectives. The plane lifts. The climb smooths out. Drink service begins without theater. When the attendant offers something stronger, she chooses water and a lemon slice. She opens a thin folder she always carries. Policy excerpts, funding clause language, a 1-page explainer that has saved entire meetings from wandering into opinion. She adds 2 notes from tonight in the margin. Intercom transcript timing matters. Mirror function empowerment reduces conflict. These are small lines, but they will appear in the training deck exactly as written, because precision survives retelling. Mid-flight, the captain steps through the curtain briefly to thank the crew for a tight turn under pressure. He thanks the lead for the neutral announcement. He thanks the cabin team for de-escalation by consistency. He does not mention the gate supervisor by name. That conversation will happen in a different room tomorrow. The crew returns to service with a kind of earned quiet that passengers recognize without needing it described. She looks around the cabin and sees what accountability buys. Order that does not rely on volume, respect that comes from doing the same thing for everyone, and a map forward that names duties rather than villains. She writes one more line to herself. Not a slogan, but a compass. Train the behavior you want to see when the room heats up. Then she closes the folder and lets the dark outside be dark, the way the sky is supposed to be when a jet is doing its job. Dawn puts a gray edge on the runway as the wheels find asphalt. Taxi is unremarkable, which is its own kind of grace. Her phone wakes when the door opens and the signal rushes back. 3 messages land in sequence. Compliance has scheduled interviews starting at 9. Treasury confirms the freeze notice was delivered to finance with the clause citation. Legal shares a hold order instructing IT to preserve Gate B7 data sources in place for 30 days, then archive for 1 year. None of the notes are performative. They read like steps on a staircase. She stays seated until most of the cabin clears. In the galley, the lead flight attendant hands over a thin printout. The incident number, the time of the brief statement correcting the PA at the gate, and a point of contact for passengers who need a delay letter. Small paperwork, big signal. She thanks the crew for running the playbook without adding color. The captain nods once and says the report will reflect a procedural review at the station, not a passenger disturbance. That framing matters downstream when rumors try to fill gaps. By the time she reaches the rideshare curb, the station manager has sent a draft schedule for the morning. Gate team interviews, supervisor debrief with HR present, device tests on the intercom, and scanners using a standard script, and a pull of badge tap logs around the podium. He offers to stand up a quiet room away from the concourse for staff to give statements without an audience. She replies yes to that and adds one line that sets tone. Include a non-retaliation reminder at the top of every invite. The ramp agent who mirrored logs last night needs protection by policy, not just goodwill. In the back seat, she opens a short deck she keeps for days like this. It is not a punishment catalog, it is a map of guardrails. One page outlines the two-person rule for messaging that affects boarding status. Another gives a flow for policy ID, checks with examples of valid and invalid uses of secondary. A third explains the mirror function, who can authorize it, and why transparency defuses heat. She drops in 2 screenshots from last night, time codes blurred, features left intact, tools, not trophies. At the hotel, her inbox holds a note from the consortium's oversight portal. It asks for a preliminary summary by noon and a release condition checklist the airline can execute to lift the freeze. She answers with clean headings: incident summary, evidence captured, deviations from policy, immediate actions, required remediation. Under remediation, she lists what restores movement, recertification for the gate team at this station, and 2 feeders, updated training with a segment on PA authority, a short test proving staff can produce policy IDs on demand, a memo reinforcing that green means board unless a system flag says otherwise, a commendation entry for the employee who surfaced the truth, a signed statement from leadership that retaliation for reporting is prohibited. She logs into the 9 o'clock like it is any other call, compliance leads, ops and legal on, HR tied in. The station manager introduces the room and reads the hold order so everyone understands the stakes. Interviews move briskly. The agent who took the pass describes the scan and his reliance on the supervisor's call. He does not try to be heroic. He tries to be precise. The security officer repeats what he said at the gate. He observed no threat trigger, only a boarding pause by the desk. The supervisor arrives with counsel. She acknowledges she cannot cite the policy for secondary after a green scan. She says she acted to maintain order. Legal notes that order is protected by adherence, not improvisation. HR outlines the next steps in her case without adjectives. Between calls, she drafts the commendation for the ramp agent. It is 1 paragraph long, focusing on action and chain of custody, mirrored manifest, and logs on request, preserved evidence, maintained calm. She asks that it be entered into his file and noted in the shift briefing the following week, not to embarrass him, but to model behavior. The station manager replies that he will present it personally. IT performs the device tests on camera. The intercom records and timestamps as designed. The scanner reads a sample of passes and logs them in order with agent initials. Nothing points to a technical fault. That matters because the fix cannot hide behind hardware. It has to live in training and culture. Ops proposes a side-by-side at the podium for the next month, so supervisors are never solo on policy calls. She agrees and adds a sunset date with an evaluation point so the change is intentional, not drift. By late morning, the packet for the consortium is complete. She sends it and copies the airline's senior team. The freeze section is short by design. It lifts upon proof of recertification and completion of specific training, plus evidence that the correction was not just scoped to 1 shift. Treasury acknowledges receipt and reminds everyone that money is a system too. It follows rules when people do. She closes her laptop and writes 1 line in her notebook, the same one she uses as a test. Would this be safe if no one filmed it? The answer last night is no. The work today is to turn it into yes, not with a slogan, but with a series of actions that can be checked. When noon hits, the sun slides higher, and the airport goes back to looking like motion without friction. Underneath, though, a series of keystrokes and interviews is bending the place toward what it claims to be. Afternoon turns the concourse glass into a mirror. Inside a conference room away from the gates, the station team files into a training that did not exist yesterday morning. No podium, no role-play theater. Just tables, a projector, and a printed stack labeled recertification. Ops opens with a simple statement that flattens defensiveness. We are here to match practice to policy. No one is on trial in this room. Everyone is accountable in this room. The tension lowers half a notch. People listen better when they are not busy bracing. The first module is not about scripts. It is about IDs. A trainer holds up a laminated card like a boarding pass and points to a line no one notices until it matters. Policy references are not paragraphs in a binder. They are document numbers you can read and retrieve. The exercise is almost childlike. Hand a scenario to a pair. Ask them to find the policy ID that applies, say it out loud, then show it on screen. Green scan and first class entitlement. What policy governs? A team finds the right line in under a minute. The room relaxes as competence replaces guessing. Next comes intercom authority. The facilitator plays 2 audio clips. The first is the neutral correction from this morning. The second is an example of a label that should never be used without a trigger and a documented cause. The trainer pauses the clip and asks a quiet question. Who owns the mic? It is not a power riddle, it is a custody chain. Every announcement carries an employee ID. Every misuse creates risk. The lesson lands because it is about stewardship, not scolding. The ramp agent who mirrored last night takes a seat in the second row. He is not asked to speak. He is given the same workbook as everyone else. Near the end, the trainer points to a slide titled Transparency Tools and cues the agent to demonstrate the mirror function again. He does it slowly, narrating each click like a safety brief. Mirror only when authorized. Keep the screen visible to the people concerned. Record the session. He finishes and sets the mouse down. The room nods. Seeing a peer do it beats any paragraph in a manual. In parallel, HR meets with the supervisor in a glass office. She brings a representative. The interview is recorded, measured, and dry. The question set is not about her tone or personality, it is about choices and documents. What policy did you believe applied? Where did you find it? When did you decide to use the intercom? Why did the announcement say disruptive after a green scan? There are pauses she cannot fill with discretion. The process moves forward without sharp edges. It moves forward anyway. By mid-afternoon, the airline's communications team drafts a public note. It is 3 sentences long because the truth does not need a belt of adjectives. We experienced a boarding delay at gate B7 while verifying procedures. Our review found misuse of process inconsistent with policy. We have initiated additional training, and a funding freeze will lift upon verified recertification. Legal signs off. Ops insists the note be posted where customers can find it without a scavenger hunt. It appears on the travel advisory page next to weather and runway construction, not buried under apology poetry. The consortium call with senior leadership runs at 4. Treasury, Ops, Legal, and the station manager join. She dials in from a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, a legal pad in front of her with 4 boxes checked and 2 still open. She starts with what matters most to the money. Evidence is preserved. Recertification is underway. Intercom authority policy has been reissued and acknowledged. Non-retaliation notices are in writing and delivered. Still pending are completion of interviews and a verification that this training extends to the 2 feeder stations in the region. Release conditions remain exactly as sent at noon. No one argues the conditions. The CFO asks for a time horizon. She answers with actions, not guesses. Recert by end of week at the hub. Feeder sessions scheduled within 10 days. Completion proofs filed to the portal upon finish. The CFO thanks her for making the path finite and testable. Finance can plan around dates. It cannot plan around vibes. That line is not hers originally, but she likes it and keeps it. Before the hour ends, she sends the commendation memo to the station manager with one request. Read this at shift briefing next Tuesday. Keep it factual. No applause. The manager replies, yes, the agent will learn about it the way good news should arrive. In a meeting where it means something to peers, not on a viral clip. Late in the day, IT drops a final note confirming that the intercom device and scanner firmware passed checks. No ghost in the machine to blame. That clarity helps everyone sleep less badly. The freeze stays in place because culture, not code, needs the reset. As dusk draws a purple line over the runway, she walks the public side of the terminal once. Eyes up, phone down. She passes a gate where an agent reads a policy ID to a colleague like a weather report. She passes another where a supervisor asks for a second set of eyes before touching the mic. None of them know who she is. They do not need to. Systems work when strangers do the right thing without being watched. She writes one sentence in her notebook before she heads out. The outcome we want is boring. And then, as always, the line that keeps the work honest. I am here for standards. Log everything. Morning 2 begins with fewer emails and more signatures. Compliance routes a one-page attestation for every employee who touches a boarding lane. I have reviewed policy IDs governing secondary screening, intercom authority, and mirror tools. I understand that green means board absent a system flag. It is not punitive. It is a seatbelt, click it, and move on. Station managers sign a parallel statement confirming that non-retaliation notices went out and that any report tied to the incident will be handled in a separate file from performance reviews. Paperwork is not culture, but it is how culture becomes enforceable. At headquarters, Treasury updates an internal dashboard, Tranche 3 frozen, release conditions 5 checkboxes, projected impact neutral if cleared by date X, tightening if not. Finance does not editorialize. Numbers are weather. The CFO schedules a brief with network ops to make sure crew planning and fuel hedges assume a short freeze. The message is adult, plan with facts, don't whisper your way through cash. The union reps ask for a seat in the recertification sessions, not to fight, but to witness. Ops says yes because witnesses make memory accurate. In the room, the trainer opens with the same sentence, we are here to match practice to policy, and then adds a new exercise. Small groups list phrases that sound procedural but aren't policy. Random screening, security discretion, courtesy downgrade, and match them to the actual codes that do exist. The line between habit and rule shows up as ink, not opinion. Mid-morning, she meets the airline's head of customer experience and a quiet director from corporate safety. They do not bring PR. They bring binders and questions. She pushes 3 concrete asks across the table, posts the policy index where agents can reach it in 2 taps, put a tiny policy ID field on the intercom screen that must be populated before a label like disruptive can be used. Add a mirror hotkey to the podium UI with a prominent on-screen watermark that logs who enabled it and when. Safety nods. These are human factors fixes, not slogans. CX adds one more, a short, customer-facing page that explains what a green scan means and what everyone should expect when boarding. Truth is calming when published. She writes the release conditions on a whiteboard, size for a kindergarten class because clarity scales 1 recert complete at hub and 2 feeders. Intercom policy reissued and acknowledged. Device field added. 3 mirror tool available and audited. 4 non-retaliation confirmed and posted. Commendation entered and read at shift. When she caps the marker, the list looks small and doable. That is, on purpose. Big promises collapse, small verifications accumulate. In the afternoon, IT ships a minor software patch to podiums at the test station. The intercom prompt now asks for a policy code before keying live. The field will accept only IDs present in the policy library. If someone tries to speak with the box blank, the mic won't open. Ops sends a screenshot to her inbox with a 1-line note, your gate now asks for receipts. She replies with a thumbs up emoji and the sentence, ship to the 2 feeders once training wraps. Meanwhile, HR completes interviews and sends a calm-voiced update. The supervisor is removed from duty pending remedial training and a final review. The agent remains on shift with a coaching note focused on policy retrieval and de-escalation. Security logs reflect no safety trigger and are filed. No drama, just movement. She asks HR to add 1 more line to the station briefings this week. Retaliation for reporting or mirroring data is a terminable offense. The sentence is plain, which is why it works. Near closing time, she meets the ramp agent in the break room before his outbound. He looks embarrassed to be thanked. She keeps it functional. Your commendation will be read Tuesday. Expect no spotlight, just the line in the briefing. He nods like that is the best outcome possible. She hands him a copy anyway. Because sometimes people need a piece of paper to hold on a tough day. The consortium portal pings upload proofs. She drops in signed recerts from the hub, screenshots of the intercom prompt. training rosters with completion times, photos of non-retaliation posters pinned by the time clocks, and a short video of the trainer demonstrating the mirror with the watermark logging who initiated it. Treasury flips 4 of 5 checkboxes to green. One remains gray, the feeder's recert dates tomorrow and the next day. She walks the concourse again, alone, no entourage. At a different gate, an agent asks a supervisor for the policy ID before making an announcement, and the supervisor answers with the code and revision date like it's nothing. At another, 2 agents practice pulling up the mirror and then closing it with the recording saved to the case shell. Bystanders do not clap. They do not know what they are seeing. Good. Back at her hotel desk, she drafts the letter that will lift the freeze when the last box turns green. It is 2 paragraphs. The first confirms completion and references artifacts by ID. The second sets a 60-day follow-up audit and a quarterly trend check on intercom labels and secondary screenings. The tone is not triumphant, it is contractual. She adds a line that has become a habit. Systems remember what people forget. She closes the day the way she opened the last one by writing a sentence that will either be true or not true when the audit lands. If no one films the next shift, will it still be correct? Use the same answer as the release gate. Then the sentence that never changes, said out loud in an empty room so it doesn't calcify into slogan. I am here for standards. Log everything. The feeder stations run their recertifications on back-to-back mornings that smell like coffee and printer ink. Smaller rooms, smaller teams, same spine. The trainer opens with the policy index like a map on a table. Agents practice saying document numbers out loud until it stops feeling awkward. A supervisor at the first feeder admits she's been using the phrase random screening as shorthand for I'm unsure. She writes the correct codes on a sticky and tapes it to the intercom panel. That is how drift reverses. Not a speech, a sticker. IT's podium patch lands overnight. At dawn, a gate agent tries to make an announcement and the mic refuses to open until the policy field is populated. He laughs softly and types the right ID. The software's little insistence feels like a seatbelt chime, annoying only until you need it. A mirror demo follows. The watermark blooms in the corner with the agent's initials, date, and time. The trainer presses record, pans the manifest for 5 seconds, stops. The file names itself with the incident shell number. Nobody applauds. Everyone writes down the keystrokes. Back at the hub, the station manager leads a short shift briefing with less theater than a weather update. He reads the commendation for the ramp agent who mirrored on request and preserved the chain. He reads it exactly once, with no adjectives and no look at this hero cadence, then moves on to the day's push times. The agent stares at the floor and tucks the paper in his pocket. That's the right size for praise in a place that runs on clock minutes. By midday, compliance uploads the last proofs to the portal. Training rosters, signed recerts, screenshots of the intercom prompt in production at both feeders, photos of the non-retaliation notices tacked by time clocks, and the mirror demo clip with the watermark. Treasury flips the final box to green. The freeze can lift as soon as the letter hits. She reads the dashboard once, then once again, not because she doubts, but because precision is a habit. The release letter is short and dry on purpose. It confirms completion of required remediation, cites artifacts by ID and timestamp, and sets 2 commitments, a 60-day spot audit and a quarterly trend review of intercom labels and secondary screenings. It lands in the CFO's inbox, CC'd to Ops, Legal, and the consortium. Treasury updates the dashboard, tranche 3, released. Finance adjusts a line item with the same care they use to balance fuel hedges. Money moves when systems do. HR closes the loop with staff. The supervisor remains off duty pending remedial training and a final review. The outcome will live in her file, not in rumor. The podium agent receives coaching focused on policy, retrieval, and de-escalation. He keeps his schedule. Security gets a thank you note for clear, accurate statements. The note references the case number rather than adjectives. Everyone hears the same sentence at the end of their meetings. Non-retaliation is not a slogan. It is enforceable and it will be enforced. Customer Experience publishes a tiny public page titled Boarding: What a Green Scan Means. It's 3 paragraphs. Green means board, unless the system flags a mismatch. Secondary checks require a policy ID. If used, you'll hear the reference. Announcements will avoid labels and stick to instructions. It reads like a promise that can be checked at a counter by a person who has been awake since 4 a.m. The page lives next to baggage rules and seat maps, not buried in press releases. Late afternoon, she walks the concourse one more time before heading to the airport office for the final call. At gate C12, a new hire points to the policy field on the intercom and asks a mentor why it's there. The mentor answers with the code and the incident number from 2 days ago, trimmed to initials and facts, no gossip. At C14, two agents quietly practice a policy check on each other, ending each exchange with the mirror hotkey just to feel the clicks. These are the kinds of rehearsals you want to catch without being seen. The call with senior leadership is efficient. Ops confirms the release conditions met, the patch deployed, and the briefings complete. Compliance outlines the 60-day audit schedule. Treasury states that cash resumed flowing at 1,500, and thanks everyone for making the path testable. She adds one ask before she signs off. Keep the intercom prompt and mirror watermark in the product backlog as permanent, not temporary. Safety nods. Permanence is the point. She sends one last note to the station manager. Schedule a brown bag next week titled, When to Ask for the Mic. 10 minutes on custody of announcements, 10 on policy IDs, 5 on what to do when you're unsure and the line is staring. Make it boring. He replies with a time and a room number. On the curb, a passenger who was in group 2 that night recognizes her and starts to thank her for what you did. She stops him gently and redirects, as practiced. We fixed a process. The people at the desk did the work. He smiles, a little confused, then nods. The most satisfying outcomes look like nothing at all. In the quiet of the car, she writes the day's last note. Systems remember what people forget. Then, almost out of habit, she lets the sentence that has anchored every step clear her head and steady her hand. I am here for standards. Log everything. 2 weeks later, the concourse looks like any other weekday. That is the point. A system that learns something should feel ordinary at speed. She walks past B7 on her way to a meeting with ops and sees nothing dramatic, only small artifacts of change. A laminated card with policy IDs is taped to the back of the podium screen. The intercom prompt refuses to go live unless a code is entered. On a side monitor, a faint watermark appears when mirror is enabled, initials and time in the corner like a hallway clock. None of this wants applause. It wants to work. In the operations office, the station manager lays out a thin stack of proofs the way a pilot lays out checklists. Recert rosters complete and signed. Intercom patch tickets closed and deployed across hub and feeders. Non-retaliation notices photographed beside time clocks, date stamped. The brown bag called When to Ask for the Mic ran 20 minutes and ended on time. Attendance sheet is clipped to the back. HR's remedial plan for the supervisor shows session scheduled and a final review date. The agent who struggled at the podium finished coaching and passed a policy retrieval quiz with full marks. There is no shine on any of it, just dates and signatures. The ramp agent arrives at the edge of the room for a brief handshake. He is reclassified as an operations quality liaison for the next quarter, a temporary title that comes with a half day a week to support policy drills and mirror practice. His take-home pay barely notices. His whirl will. He looks more startled than proud. She tells him the same line she gives every truth keeper. The job is not to be a hero. The job is to be accurate when it counts. He nods like accuracy has heft. Compliance dials into the last checkpoint call before the 60-day review window opens. They confirm the incident shell is complete, artifacts cross-referenced, and a trend report template is ready to pull intercom labels and secondary screenings by station. Treasury is on for 5 minutes, long enough to mark the tranche released and to rename the dashboard tab from incident to standard. Finance speaks to the weather again. Cash flow is normal. Ops reviews a memo that will go to every station manager by the end of day. 2 paragraphs, 1 promise. The intercom prompt stays. The mirror watermark stays. The culture reset does not sunset. She signs the letter that fixes the freeze in the past tense and gives back the momentum that was always contingent on behavior. The CFO thanks her for keeping release conditions finite and visible. Legal thanks ops for maintaining chain of custody like a habit and not a performance. Safety asks for the audit schedule to include random morning and evening checks, not just midday slots. She agrees. Bias hides in fatigue and rush. The calendar will hunt both. Back at the gate bank, a new hire practices the intercom, while a mentor stands close enough to read the screen but not close enough to touch it. The policy field fills with a code and a revision date. The mic opens. The announcement keeps to instructions. The mentor nods once. The new hire signs the attestation and tucks it into a folder that will live behind the desk for a year and then go to storage. Paperwork is how memory gets a spine. She ducks into a quiet conference room to write the last 2 documents this incident will ever need. The first is a single page titled "What Green Means," adapted for internal use. It fits on a clipboard, not a poster. Green means board unless a system flag fires. Secondary requires a policy ID. Intercom labels are instructions, not opinions. Mirror exists to lower temperature, not raise it. The second page is for herself and the consortium. A debrief with 4 lines under outcomes. Misuse of process identified without spectacle. Staff trained with tools, not slogans. Systems patched so the right behavior is the easy behavior. Truth keepers recognized, retaliation off the table. Before she leaves the airport, she stops at a window that overlooks the field and watches a departure roll rotate and lift. Routine flight, on time, unburdened by a chain of avoidable choices. The difference between that and 2 weeks ago is not a speech. It is a handful of fields in a UI, a short checklist, a name typed into a commendation, and a clause read out loud at the right moment. The work is small on purpose, because small things are repeatable. Her phone buzzes. A calendar reminder pings for the 60-day audit. Another marks the quarterly trend review. She adds 1 more recurring block to her own schedule, a standing half hour to walk a concourse unannounced at different hubs, to look for laminated policy cards that are unchanged because they are useful, and watermarks that appear because people use the mirror without fear. She has learned that systems do not stay honest on their own. They need witnesses with pens. On the rideshare curb, a man from Group 2 recognizes her again. He starts to thank her for fixing an airline. She corrects him gently. We tuned a process. The people here did the work. He tilts his head, thinking it over, and then smiles like someone who understands a different kind of power. It is not the power to punish. It is the power to design what happens next. She gets in the car and opens her notebook. 2 lines, both promises. 60-day spot audit, unannounced. Quarterly trend check, published to the portal. Then she writes the sentence that has followed her from lobby to gate to cabin and back. Not as a slogan, but as a practice. She can ask anyone to show in the logs. I am here for standards. Log everything.